Top HFY Stories, The Chase. The wind howled through the dense forest, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. In the midst of the wilderness, a group of alien hunters moved with practiced silence, their advanced equipment scanning every inch of the terrain. They were not used to being hunted. For centuries, they had been the apex predators, the ones who sought, tracked, and eliminated prey across the galaxy. But today, they were the ones being hunted. The leader of the group, a tall and imposing figure named Korath, paused. His helmet's visor glowed a soft blue as he surveyed the surroundings. His species, the Kthar, had conquered countless worlds and had never met a species capable of evading their traps or outsmarting their technology. But now, they were in pursuit of a quarry unlike any they had ever encountered. A human. At first, the Kthar had thought it would be an easy task. They had tracked the human to a remote colony, a small, insignificant settlement on the fringes of known space. The human, a soldier named John Carter, had survived against overwhelming odds. He had single-handedly repelled an entire Kthar assault, a feat that baffled the hunters. "I don't care if he's only one human," Korath had said then, voice cold with disdain. "Bring him to me, make sure he suffers." But the moment they set foot on the planet, everything changed. Carter had vanished into the forest, leaving behind nothing but broken branches and the faintest traces of his footprints. The hunters had deployed every tracker, every drone, every high-tech sensor, but still, the human eluded them. Now, as Korath and his team moved deeper into the forest, they could feel it. They were no longer the hunters, they were the prey. A sudden noise, crunching leaves, echoed from the dense brush. The hunters immediately turned in unison, weapons raised, their eyes scanning the shadows, but there was nothing. "He's here," Korath muttered under his breath. Without warning, a figure sprang from the underbrush, moving with incredible speed and precision. It was Carter, his face a mask of determination. He darted between the trees, taking advantage of the terrain with a skill that made him seem as one with the forest. "Fire," Korath ordered, but his voice was drowned out by the noise of gunfire. Carter zigged and zagged, moving in a way that defied logic. His training had made him one with the environment, knowing how to use every branch, every rock, every shadow to his advantage. The Kthar's weapons, powerful and devastating, merely grazed the air around him. Then, in the blink of an eye, Carter disappeared again, melting into the landscape as if he had never been there at all. The Kthar hunters paused, confused. The human had a way of moving, a way of thinking that they couldn't predict. It was as if he had an instinct they could not replicate. They had technology, intelligence, and raw power, but he had something more, sheer will, an unrelenting drive to survive. "I told you," Carter's voice suddenly rang out from above them. "You can't hunt what you can't catch." A flash of light, an explosion, suddenly rocked the forest. Korath looked up just in time to see a series of explosive charges detonate along the edges of their perimeter. The human had set traps of his own, and now, the Kthar were surrounded. The forest was no longer silent, it was alive with the sounds of battle. Carter's tactics were unlike anything the hunters had faced. He was patient, waiting for them to make a mistake, to expose a weakness. Every step he took, every move he made was calculated. He was a predator, but unlike the Kthar, his prey was not a thing, but a force of nature. The Kthar had underestimated him. They had thought their superiority would guarantee their victory, but in the face of human ingenuity, determination, and adaptability, their advanced technology meant little. Korath gritted his teeth. It was clear now, this was not just a hunt, it was a test of survival, of strength, and of the human spirit. And as the last of the Kthar hunters fell, Korath was left to consider one undeniable truth: humans, when pushed to the brink, were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They weren't just survivors. They were conquerors. And in the end, they would always win. Top HFY Stories, The Chase, continued. The dense woods were eerily quiet once the last of the Kthar hunters fell. The once untouchable predators had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and overwhelmed by a single human. John Carter, breathless but determined, emerged from the shadows, his boots leaving barely a mark in the soft forest floor. The trail he had set for the Kthar had been a masterstroke of misdirection, false leads, carefully planned ambush points, and traps that used their own technology against them. Carter moved toward the wreckage, inspecting the last of the alien hunters. The Kthar were strong, their bodies almost impervious to standard human weapons, but they were not prepared for someone who knew how to use their environment to his advantage. "Not bad," Carter muttered to himself. He'd been trained for missions like this, but even his superiors would have thought the idea of taking down an entire hunting party of Kthar to be impossible. Yet, here he was, standing victorious in their midst. He bent down, retrieving a Kthar energy blade from the body of the fallen leader, Korath. The weapon hummed softly, its energy field crackling with dangerous power. He could feel the pulse of the blade's technology, the raw alien force, yet it felt strangely manageable in his hands. They had underestimated the ingenuity of a human soldier. His mission was far from over, though. Carter knew that the Kthar would not take this defeat lightly. The galaxy had seen the rise of humanity as a force to be reckoned with, and Carter was a symbol of that strength. The message he'd sent today would ripple across the stars, a message that even the most terrifying species in the universe should think twice before crossing humanity. A soft rustle from the treeline caught his attention. Carter raised his weapon, his senses alert, but it was not another Kthar hunter. Instead, a lone figure stepped from the shadows, an old friend, someone Carter hadn't seen in years. "Lena," Carter said with a grin, "I thought you might be close by." Lena, a fellow soldier from the human resistance forces, smiled back. She was a skilled marksman and had once been Carter's partner in several covert operations. Together, they had fought battles across war-torn planets, always managing to outwit enemies much larger and better equipped than themselves. "You always make things too interesting," Lena replied, her voice tinged with amusement as she surveyed the wreckage around them. "I swear, every time I think you've gotten yourself into the worst possible situation, you somehow turn it around." "I don't just survive, Lena, I win," Carter said, sheathing the energy blade at his side. "And that's the message I wanted to send." The two of them shared a brief, silent acknowledgement of what they had just accomplished. The Kthar had come expecting an easy hunt. They had brought their technology, their strength, and their arrogance, but they had underestimated one thing: the resilience of humanity. "We need to move," Lena said after a moment, her voice shifting to business mode. "There's no telling how long it'll take for more Kthar reinforcements to arrive." Carter nodded, his mind already racing ahead. There would be no celebration, no time for rest. The Kthar had now seen what humans were capable of, and their pride would demand retribution. Carter had to warn the others, organize a defense, and prepare for the inevitable retaliation. But one thing was certain: humanity had proven that it could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most dangerous predators. The Kthar had learned a valuable lesson. The next time they came to hunt, they would find something unexpected waiting for them, something that would fight back. As Carter and Lena disappeared into the shadows of the forest, the winds howled again, but this time, the sound was different. It was not the wind alone. It was the voice of a warning, echoing across the galaxy. Humanity had entered the fray. And the chase had only just begun. Top HFY Stories, The Chase, continued. The stars glimmered overhead as Carter and Lena made their way through the dense underbrush, their movements deliberate and swift. The forest around them, once tranquil, now felt charged with a new sense of urgency. The Kthar would not take their defeat lightly. In fact, Carter knew they would escalate their efforts. The message had been clear: humanity was no longer the prey, it was the hunter. "We can't stay here for long," Lena said, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "They'll be coming in force, you know that, right?" "I know," Carter replied, his voice steady, "but I need to contact command. We need reinforcements if we're going to hold the line." They reached a clearing, and Carter activated a small, compact device from his belt, a comm unit designed for covert operations. The small screen flickered to life, displaying encrypted channels and secure frequencies. As he dialed in the military network, the thought of the Kthar regrouping made his pulse quicken, but there was a strange sense of calm in him too. He had just faced the galaxy's most feared predators and had come out on top. This wasn't just a battle, it was the beginning of something larger. The human resistance was stronger than anyone could have imagined. "Commands offline," Carter muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. "Damn it." Lena didn't hesitate. "We'll go to the next relay station. It's a few clicks west. The Kthar can't have taken it out yet." Without wasting another moment, they turned toward the next point of contact, moving through the terrain with the precision of well-trained soldiers. It had been years since Carter had fought alongside Lena, but their bond was unshakable. The constant, harrowing battles against impossible odds had forged an unspoken understanding between them. In that moment, they were an unstoppable force. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the Kthar High Command was seething. Their pride had been wounded, and their warriors, renowned for their prowess in battle, had been shown to be fallible. Korath, the once proud leader, was a broken figure in the command chamber, battered and humiliated. His body had survived, but his honor had not. "They cannot be allowed to get away with this," a cold voice echoed through the command room. It belonged to Thyra, the Kthar warlord, a figure whose presence alone was enough to make even the most seasoned Kthar soldiers falter. He was known for his cruelty and tactical genius, and he had a deep, burning hatred for humanity ever since the humans had thwarted his plans years ago on the desert planet of Varelos. "I will personally hunt this human," Thyra continued, his voice laced with venom. "I'll show them that the Cthar are not to be trifled with." "Warlord, with all due respect," one of the advisors ventured, "we should reconsider this course. The humans' tactics are unpredictable. We should focus on neutralizing the human colonies first." Thyra's gaze turned icy. "The human's survival against our elite is not mere luck. He is a symbol. If we do not destroy him, we risk inspiring more resistance. His victory will embolden the entire galaxy to defy us. No, I'll handle this personally. Prepare the fleet." Back in the forest, Carter and Lena continued their trek toward the relay station, but time was running out. The Cthar had certainly regrouped, and the next attack would be far more brutal. As they neared the station, Carter could already hear the distant hum of enemy craft in the sky. The Cthar weren't wasting time, they were coming. "We need to get inside," Carter said, urgency filling his voice. "Now." They sprinted the last few hundred meters to the relay station. The structure was built into the side of a cliff, its sleek, metallic surface blending with the rocky environment. Carter knew there was a single, secure entry point. They reached it, and he quickly input the emergency code into the console. The door slid open, and they rushed inside, taking cover behind the reinforced walls. Lena scanned the surroundings. "This place should hold for now, but how long do you think we have?" Carter's eyes flicked to the screen, where the comm unit was now coming online. Static filled the air as the encrypted channel buzzed to life. He quickly input the access key, hoping against hope that someone on the other side would respond. The screen crackled, and then a voice came through, familiar, calm, and authoritative. "Carter, this is Colonel Jacobs. We've been tracking your signal. We've seen what happened." "Colonel," Carter said, his voice filled with relief, "we need help. The Cthar are mobilizing for a full-scale assault. They'll be here in a matter of hours, and they'll be coming for me." "We've already initiated a response," Colonel Jacobs said, his voice unwavering. "Reinforcements are en route. Hold tight. Your actions have proven humanity's strength. We're not letting this go unanswered." Carter glanced at Lena, a quiet determination in his eyes. The war was escalating, but so was the resistance. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting to reshape the future of the galaxy. "We'll hold the line," Carter said, his words resolute. As the comm channel went silent, he turned to Lena, the weight of what was to come pressing down on them. "We're about to show the Cthar just how big a mistake they made," Carter said, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Lena nodded, her weapon ready at her side. "Let's make sure they never forget the name Carter." And as the first shadows of the Cthar fleet descended on the planet, the chase was on once again, but this time, the hunters were about to learn that humanity was no longer the prey, it was the hunter. Top HFY Stories, The Chase, continued. The hum of the Cthar warships echoed through the atmosphere, their massive engines cutting through the air with the precision of a predator closing in on its prey. Carter stood at the relay station's command center, watching the sensors flicker as the incoming fleet began to land on the planet's surface. His pulse quickened, but his expression remained cold. Lena was by his side, her gaze locked on the screens, assessing the incoming threats. "They're here," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "At least 20 ships, more on the way." Carter's mind raced. 20 Cthar ships, each one brimming with hundreds of elite soldiers. They had come for him, but this time, it wasn't just him they were after, it was humanity, it was everything they stood for. "We need to get to the outer defense grid," Carter said, turning to Lena. "If we can buy some time, the reinforcements should be able to reach us before they overwhelm the station." Lena nodded, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the approaching fleet. "We're not giving them a chance to land, we'll hit them hard, just like we did before." They moved quickly, setting the relay station's security systems to lockdown. As they left the station's reinforced perimeter, they made their way toward the hilltops, where the defense grid lay. The path was rocky and narrow, but their training allowed them to navigate the terrain with ease, moving like shadows in the dimming light. Meanwhile, deep within the Cthar flagship, Warlord Thyra paced back and forth in his command chamber. His massive form loomed over the tactical displays, his claws twitching with impatience. The defeat of his hunting party still burned like a wound in his pride, but this time, the human would not escape. The humans had outsmarted him once, he would not let it happen again. "I want them alive," Thyra growled, his voice laced with venom. "The human, Carter, he will make a fine trophy, but I want him to suffer. I want him to understand the consequences of defying the Cthar." His officers acknowledged the order, and soon, the warlord's ship began to deploy its landing parties. Thousands of Cthar soldiers, equipped with the most advanced weaponry the galaxy had ever seen, poured onto the surface of the planet. They moved swiftly, their purpose clear: they were going to eradicate every last trace of humanity. But Carter was already several steps ahead. As he and Lena reached the defense grid, Carter began to set up a series of explosive charges along the perimeter. He knew the Kthar's tactics: they would land, establish a foothold, and then push forward to eliminate any resistance. He had to make sure that they would never reach the heart of the human colony. Lena took up a position behind a rocky outcrop, watching the Kthar forces as they descended from the skies. They were coming in droves, their heavy boots thundering on the ground as they moved toward the relay station's last known location. Carter's breath was steady, his mind was focused, the charges were set. He tapped a button on his wrist comm, and a series of explosions rang out, shaking the earth beneath them. The first wave of Kthar soldiers, disoriented by the sudden blast, stumbled backward. Now, Carter muttered to himself, voice low but filled with resolve. From his position, he activated a series of targeting systems embedded in the defense grid. Missiles shot into the sky, streaking toward the incoming Kthar ships with deadly precision. Each missile found its mark, tearing through the thick hulls of the Kthar vessels. Explosions erupted, sending debris raining down onto the surface below. Lena didn't wait for the chaos to settle. She fired a volley of high-caliber rounds from her rifle, picking off the Kthar soldiers who had scrambled to recover. The alien warriors, so used to being the ones in control, were now scattered, confused, and vulnerable. Carter's heart pounded in his chest, but there was no fear in him. There was only focus. His mind moved faster than his enemies could react, calculating each move with a cold, methodical precision. The Kthar quickly regrouped, realizing that their initial strategy had failed. Styria's fleet had been severely damaged, and the human resistance was fiercer than they had anticipated. They began to adapt, deploying smaller skirmisher units to outflank Carter and Lena's position. "We need to push them back before they can organize," Lena said, reloading her weapon. "If they get a foothold here, the rest of the colony is done for." Carter nodded, his gaze never leaving the battlefield. He triggered the defense grid's emergency signal, calling in air support from their backup forces. The sky above them darkened as human fighter craft swooped down from high orbit, their engines roaring as they strafed the Kthar soldiers below. The battle raged on for hours, but Carter's resolve never wavered. He and Lena held their ground, cutting down wave after wave of Kthar soldiers. With each battle cry, each clash of weapons, they proved the same undeniable truth: humanity had teeth, and it wasn't afraid to bite. As the dust began to settle, Carter and Lena stood amidst the wreckage of the battlefield. The Kthar forces, though still formidable, had been forced to retreat. The defense grid had held. The colony had been saved, at least for now. Carter wiped the sweat from his brow and turned to Lena. "I think we've sent them a message." Lena smirked. "I'd say so. Let's just hope they're listening." But deep in the heart of the Kthar fleet, Styria's rage simmered. The humans had fought back again, and they had won, for now. But the war was far from over. The Kthar were not accustomed to losing, and the message had been received loud and clear. Styria's voice rang out across the comms: "Prepare the fleet for the next phase. This human, Carter, will not survive what's coming." But Carter wasn't listening anymore. He had his own message to send, and he would not stop until the galaxy knew that humanity was not to be underestimated. The chase was on. And this time, humanity was setting the pace. HFY Stories, The Chase, continued. The remnants of the Kthar forces limped back to their ships, regrouping under the blood-red skies of the devastated colony. The sound of retreat echoed across the barren landscape, but beneath the chaos and destruction, a simmering anger burned in the heart of Warlord Styra. His pride, wounded beyond repair, demanded action. "This will not stand," Styra muttered, clenching his fists in fury. "These humans think they've won, but they've only delayed the inevitable." His officers gathered around him, eyes filled with a mix of fear and reverence. They had seen their leader at his most terrifying, but this was different. The warlord's fury now consumed him like a wildfire, and the Kthar knew it would not be long before they returned with reinforcements. The next attack would be decisive. The humans had shown they could fight, but they would learn that the Kthar were not easily defeated. Meanwhile, on the ground, Carter and Lena were not resting. Their victory was hard-earned, but they knew the war was far from over. The battle for the colony had been won, but the Kthar were a persistent enemy, and their response would come quickly. They had underestimated humanity once, but Carter knew the next confrontation would be more brutal. The stakes had only risen. "We need to set up an early warning system," Lena said, looking over the horizon where the last Kthar ship had disappeared into the sky. "The Kthar are just waiting to regroup and launch a second wave. We can't afford to be caught off guard." Carter nodded, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. I'll get in touch with command again. If we can get the reinforcements here faster, we might be able to outlast them. But as he attempted to connect to the military network again, his screen flickered, showing only static. His heart skipped a beat, but he masked the concern in his voice. Damn it, we're cut off again. The Kthar must have taken down our communications. Lena didn't miss a beat. Then we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. We can't wait for reinforcements. We're going to have to hit them first. Carter glanced at her, the weight of her words sinking in. It was a dangerous move. Striking first was always a gamble, but it might be their only chance. He couldn't risk letting the Kthar regain their footing. They needed to be put on the defensive, and they needed to do it now. I'm with you, Carter said, his voice unwavering. They began to plan their next move: intelligent sabotage, guerrilla tactics, and precise strikes. The Kthar had technology and firepower, but the humans had something more: adaptability. The ability to think on their feet, to use the environment, and to fight dirty when necessary. Carter and Lena would turn the tide in their favor once again. As the night settled, they made their way to the nearest Kthar outpost. Their path was treacherous, fraught with danger, but they knew they couldn't afford to waste time. Their stealth suits blended into the darkness, and their movements were like shadows. They infiltrated the compound with ease, setting explosives on key infrastructure points. Carter moved quickly, placing charges on the power grid while Lena disabled the Kthar communication relay. They worked like clockwork, their familiarity with each other making every movement seamless. But as Carter reached for the final charge, a sudden sound echoed from behind them, a low, rumbling growl that sent a chill down his spine. Without warning, a group of Kthar soldiers emerged from the shadows, their glowing eyes gleaming in the dim light. They had been lying in wait, knowing the humans would attempt something like this. Carter's instincts kicked in. Lena, go. Now, he shouted. Lena didn't hesitate. She grabbed her weapon and fired a barrage of rounds into the advancing Kthar, forcing them to retreat momentarily. Carter, meanwhile, activated the detonator, triggering a series of massive explosions that rocked the outpost to its core. The Kthar soldiers, thrown into chaos by the blasts, regrouped quickly, but the damage had been done. The outpost was crippled, its power supply cut, and the communication channels severed. Carter and Lena didn't wait for the Kthar to recover. They sprinted back into the wilderness, evading the counterattack that was sure to follow. As they disappeared into the dense forest, Carter took a deep breath. We bought ourselves some time, he said, a faint smile on his lips. Lena looked at him with a wry grin. Time's all we've got. We need to make it count. They returned to the colony to regroup and plan their next strike. The Kthar might be relentless, but humanity's spirit was unyielding. Carter and Lena knew they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of their people. The war was bigger than one battle, bigger than one victory. It was about proving to the universe that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The Kthar had chased them, but now, it was humanity's turn to set the pace. They would fight, they would adapt, and they would win. And the next time the Kthar came for them, they would find a species that would not bend, would not break, and would never surrender. The chase was on. And this time, it would be the Kthar running. Top HFY Stories, The Chase, continued. The war was escalating. The Kthar's retaliatory strike came faster than Carter and Lena had anticipated, but they had already set the wheels in motion. The Kthar underestimated the resilience of humanity, and now they were about to pay for it. Carter's communication devices were still down, but he and Lena had found a way to get word out. A hidden military relay station, buried deep within the planet's mountains, would allow them to reconnect with command. They had to move quickly. The Kthar might have underestimated them before, but this time, their response would be swift and brutal. We're running out of time, Carter said as they moved through the dense forest. Their footsteps were muffled by the thick undergrowth, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them. The Kthar will be here within hours. We need to get that relay station operational and get our forces in position. Lena's eyes were sharp, scanning the area. We'll make it. We've faced worse. It wasn't just the Kthar that they had to contend with now. The planet's volatile weather was beginning to turn. A constant reminder that nature itself could be an enemy in these kinds of operations. The clouds above darkened, and a distant rumble of thunder echoed through the trees. They would need to finish their mission before the storm hit. As they approached the relay station, Carter couldn't help but think about how far they had come. A few months ago, humanity had been seen as weak, insignificant, a fledgling species with no real place in the galaxy. But now, the Kthar were hunting them, and the entire universe was starting to take notice. The relay station was nestled in a valley, its metallic surface almost entirely camouflaged by the surrounding cliffs. The station was designed to be hidden from enemy forces, its location known only to the highest levels of human command. As they approached the station's entrance, Lena scanned the area for signs of enemy movement. "It's quiet," she said, her voice low. "Too quiet." Carter nodded, instinctively reaching for his sidearm. "Don't relax yet." They made their way inside, their movements precise and calculated. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and they stepped into the dimly lit chamber. The station's main control console sat in the center of the room, surrounded by a variety of communication equipment and monitoring systems. Carter approached the console, his fingers flying over the keypad, but as he worked, a sudden burst of static filled the room, followed by a deep, guttural voice that sent a chill down his spine. "Human," the voice growled. "You think you can hide? You think you can outwit us? You will pay for your defiance." Carter froze. He recognized the voice. "Thyra," he muttered under his breath. The Kthar warlord had somehow tracked them here, and now he was in their network. He had anticipated their move. "Carter," Lena hissed, her eyes wide with alarm. "We've been compromised." Carter's mind raced. Thyra had anticipated their every move. They were trapped. "Get to the backup relay," Carter shouted, his voice sharp. "I'll hold them off." Lena nodded, her eyes narrowing. "No, we do this together." Before Carter could protest, a series of alarms blared across the station, signaling that the Kthar had already landed on the planet. The warlord's forces were closing in fast, and the station was compromised. Carter took a deep breath and focused. "Fine, together, then, let's make sure this relay goes out, or we won't get a second chance." The two of them sprinted to the secondary control panel, where Lena quickly began rerouting the communication channels. Carter could hear the Kthar soldiers in the distance, their heavy boots pounding across the station's exterior. "We've got maybe 5 minutes, Lena said, her voice steady despite the urgency. "Once this relay is active, command will know exactly where we are, but we need to hold the Kthar off long enough to make sure the signal gets through." Carter's heart pounded, but his mind remained sharp. "Then we make it 5 minutes they'll never forget." Outside, the first wave of Kthar soldiers emerged from the trees, their weapons raised and glowing with lethal energy. They moved with terrifying speed, a blur of alien menace, but Carter and Lena had faced worse. They had survived worse. Carter grabbed the nearest weapon, a mounted plasma cannon, and began firing at the advancing Kthar. Each shot struck true, vaporizing the alien soldiers as they tried to close the distance. The sound of the cannon echoed through the valley, sending waves of shock and awe through the Kthar ranks. Lena, ever the sharpshooter, took her position beside him, laying down cover fire with deadly precision. The two of them moved like a well-oiled machine, pushing back the Kthar forces, buying time for the relay to complete. With every shot fired, the Kthar learned a brutal lesson: humanity was not their prey, they were the hunters now. As the final signal was sent, the massive doors to the relay station began to open. Carter and Lena exchanged a brief glance, both knowing this was their last stand. "We've done it," Carter said, his voice low. "Now, let's make sure they never forget us." The Kthar surged forward in full force, but Carter and Lena didn't hesitate. They fought with everything they had, every tactic, every ounce of strength, and every bit of rage. This was their planet, this was their fight. And the Kthar had just made their final mistake. As the relay station finally powered down, and the last of the Kthar forces retreated, Carter stood victorious, his body covered in sweat and dirt. The message had been sent, the reinforcements were coming, and the Kthar would never forget the name of the humans who had made them run. The chase had turned, and this time, humanity was the one in pursuit. The galaxy would know that humanity was not just a species to be hunted, it was a species to be feared.